you have TikToks and WhatsApps and YouTubes, unfortunately not coming out of India.
What do you think needs to change in a founder's mindset?
The output from a 5-month successful startup is to be able to give a 5-minute pitch for their startup. One of the things I internalized when I was a mentor at Microsoft is,
what would be that one thing that you would love to see Indian startup doing more?
I don't think there are too many B2B companies. Initially, you started with HCL, if I'm not wrong. Right. What do you have to share in this?
Even though I worked with the product company like SAP, but I was still part of the solutions team, right, which was largely
Few $1 trillion company CEOs are actually from India. Right?
We are the third largest startup ecosystem globally. What do you think has been the primary driver for this rapid growth?
It's English. It's a lot of engineering colleges and tech talent, and then...
Hey, hi, my name is Malthi and I'm a product consultant and a product leadership coach, and I'm also the host and founder of Product Talk with Malthi. In this episode, I'm talking to a very seasoned product leader from Flipkart, Raghu Ramanujam. And he has been entrenched in the Indian startup ecosystem, whether it is InMobi, whether it is Zoho, and more recently at Flipkart. In this episode, we touch upon a very, very interesting topic of what does it take for Indian startups to become the global giants? Is the next $1 trillion company, tech company, coming from India? So tune into it and subscribe to the channel and make sure you watch this episode. Thank you, Raghu, for joining us today for this conversation.
Pleasure.
Yeah. So, we are right now in one of the most exciting times of India's startup ecosystem, right? I mean, in the last 15 years, we have, I think, grown up by leaps and bounds, right? There have been tremendous number of unicorns. There are new success stories, a lot more IPOs coming in. Of course, we have had the funding winters. So today, let's kind of, dive into this thing, especially you come with so much of startup background. So as of the stats that I look at, today we are the third largest startup ecosystem globally, right? So what do you think has been the primary driver for this rapid growth? Any key milestones that you kind of want to talk about?
I think it's interesting because obviously our population is massive and we have that advantage. But I can even zero it down to a few trends that possibly consciously or subconsciously played into the way things have panned out, right? So if I look at early 70s and throughout 70s, right? There's been a huge proliferation of engineering colleges and so on, right? And that was seen as a thing, right? 80s again, right? And what these engineering colleges do is it churns out enormous level of tech talent, right? At least on paper, right? 80s again, there was significant movement in terms of early stage services companies coming in, the Wipros, TCS of the world. And English and tech talent again started working together to enable that, where India was seen as a very viable service destinations for offshore development and so on. Right. 90s again, there could be viewed as interesting trend where global product companies started setting up shops in India. I mean, development centers in India started growing those and so on. 2000s, our own product companies started evolving. And then from then, that's where the 15 years that you talk about started, right? So if you
the hockey stick growth,
what went into the start of the 15 years, it's English, it's a lot of engineering colleges and tech talent, services hubs, and then the emergence of companies like Microsoft and Wipro, and Microsoft and Yahoo for that matter, setting up large development centers and tech talent, and that is what I think contributed to this ecosystem, right? That itself is not enough. And if I said that's what went into where we are today, there's been a tremendous, I wouldn't say 15 years, one of the earliest product companies that I have been involved in, right, Zoho, right? Started pretty much in 1998 or so, right? So which means even in 2004, 2005, there has been some green shoots of product ecosystem building, right? If you equate VC funding and the startup ecosystem to product evolution, then you could say it's 15, 18 years, but otherwise it's more like 22, 23 years. You know?
Right.
That's how I think about it.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I think you and I were part of that late 90s revolution, especially with the internet coming in and, this all becoming accessible. I think it was kind of a lot of pieces coming together and, of course, then kind of taking off from there.
Yeah.
I would say in the last few years, India is kind of emerging more as a product nation, right? I think we are also on that tipping point of saying that services where we started in the 80s and now we are kind of transforming more towards products part of it, right? I see a lot of colleges, for example, or a lot of organizations have these incubators, accelerators. We have this whole Atmanirbhar Bharat things. Do you think that's also kind of is helping further building up this whole startup ecosystem?
No, certainly, right? I mean, my first interaction with one of these accelerators, incubators was in 2012, 2013, when Microsoft was setting up their accelerator here, right? It does a lot of things for the ecosystem, right? And as somebody who was involved in that for about 4 to 5 years, which is across 7 to 8 batches, the program definitely evolved. I mean, right from the cohort of companies that we saw in the first cohort to what we saw in the 7th or 8th, there's a very market shift, right? And in terms of what they provide for the startups, right? Clearly, they provide, what does a startup need, right? When I was running my startup, I used to look at every person as one of the 3 categories. Can they be my customer?
Okay.
Can they work for me or become part of my team, right? Third is, can they fund me, right? So you get good access to all these in terms of from these incubators. And the best part was many of these incubators were also mentored and run by seasoned startup successful exit entrepreneurs, right? Which meant they knew how to scale businesses, and that does not guarantee success in any manner, because if it did, everybody and anybody would be churning it again and again.
Correct.
Because every new startup, you start at zero. I'm reminded of a story of Brian Lara, who scored 375. And he went to one of his mentors and said, how should I approach my next innings? And he said, your next inning starts at zero. Right?
Correct.
So every new startup starts at, just because you built a $3 billion, multi-billion dollar valuation business, it still starts at that.
Correct.
And to think of entrepreneurs being able to get these in a time compressed manner in 6 to 8 weeks or so, or 3 to 4 months is what most accelerators run their programmers. That's incredible learning, right?
Correct.
And to be able to, at the end of the 4 months, the output from a 5-month successful startup in an incubator is to be able to give a 5-minute pitch for their startup, to tell a story about their startup.
Correct.
In 5 minutes, literally, not even 10 minutes, in 5 minutes, and come back and say, this is why we are doing this is why it's a big problem, this is why you should be our customers, or this is why you should be our investors, right?
Correct.
So that's 5 months of learning to be able to put out a
Distilled
5-minute
in 5 minutes.
pitch for whatever problem you're solving and whatever startup you're building. That's a pretty interesting exercise, and it's a very condensed form of learning, if I may call it that.
I agree. But I think one of the things which you were earlier also saying, right? I mean, I think in the 0 to 1 phase, I think 0 to 1, or maybe I would say even 1 to 10, there are a lot of these angel investors or incubators which are being set up. Do you think in the 10 to 100 or 100 to 1000, which is basically, you are from early adoption, you're kind of getting started in terms of early growth phase. Do you think there is enough support? Because that's where I also feel that, you're about to look for your product market fit. Do you think there is enough support, there is enough guidance available for the founders?
Most of the startups fail due to what is called a product market fit.
Right.
I mean, have they been able to identify what problem they are solving and demonstrate it with a finite set of customers, right? Then after that, it becomes a scaling problem, which is the 10 to 100 or whatever you referred to.
Right.
Where startups need the absolute high level of help
Right.
is in the 0 to 10 phase, right? Where there is some demonstration, they have understood what they want to build, there is validation of it. While after that, it is not a walk in the park,
Correct.
at least you know what
The
you're going to
foundational
build.
aspects. Yeah.
And if you look at the startup journeys of even some of the very successful startups, the 0 to 10 has been not a straight line, but a very convoluted, various pivots changing. We want to do this, but not that. We want to change these approaches to the market and so on. Beyond that, it's a scaling problem, right? Which founders, good founders at least, are able to navigate. But being able to work through this period of intense uncertainty,
Right.
and should I do this or that?
Most tricky one.
Doing either is easy,
Right.
An entrepreneur's job is not like a consultant's job where you say you can do this, these are the options. An entrepreneur has to say, this is what I'm going to do, and do it well, right? It's about decision making, and it's about taking, you're at a fork, you basically decide this is where I'm going to go as.
And take it with conviction.
Take it with conviction, and I mean, you cannot guarantee success,
Correct.
but at least walk down the path with a lot of conviction.
Right.
That's where they need a lot of things. And I'll also tell you the other side of these incubators, right? Again, it just clutters up your mind too. You have a certain conviction, and then you have a mentor who spent 20 years, not sure whether he's that much wiser or anything, but he comes in and says, this is what you should do.
Yeah.
Again, it's up to the founders in terms of how they receive that, act on it. Some of them have been successful because of that. Some of them have failed because of that.
Correct.
So that's a part that is very interesting,
Yeah. And it's very contextual, right? I mean,
Exactly.
in the industry
Exactly.
you play.
Exactly.
Sometimes it's also about the timing. Are you too early for the market?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So yeah.
So which is why I think one of the things I internalized when I was a mentor at Microsoft is you can at best be a good sounding board.
Yeah.
I mean, the ability to be a good sounding board is hugely underrated.
Correct.
I mean, a founder definitely knows much more than a mentor
Any
does.
advisor.
Any advisor does. So it's about, is the founder able to go back with a sense? I spoke to this mentor. I mean, maybe this is how I should think about it, rather than say this founder. The mentor is not there to give answers.
Correct.
He or she is there to more help you see what you want to do, and help you build conviction in that.
Correct.
That's how I see it.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you kind of really nailed it down. A mentor or an advisor's role is more like a sounding board, just to probably sometimes to just declutter the thoughts in your own mind.
Yeah. And just a question to you. I mean, my journey has been relatively more boring, if I may call it that. It's just early stage startups all along, long stint at Zoho, then good stint at InMobi, did my own startup, telecom, and so on, right? You've been in places, right? You worked initially you started with HCL, if I'm not wrong. Right. How did that transformation from the service mindset to the product mindset work?
Yeah. So for me, I mean, it started very early. So I think first 7-8 years were in the services thing, even though I worked with a product company like SAP, but I was still part of the solutions team, right, which was largely custom development. And I was an accidental PM. But it took a lot of while. And these were the days when you did not have these online communities or, playbooks which tells you this is what a product manager should do. So it was a lot of things just by doing it. And I realized that, when you are in a services things, you are just so much focused on what this customer needs. Just go with what the customer tells you. You are not even debating whether this should be built or not. Versus then you're coming down and you're looking at, okay, I have a customer base of 2,000 large enterprise customers and only one customer is asking for it. Should I really build this or not? Definitely, I know that this customer is probably giving 4%, largely, almost 4%, 5% of my revenue is coming from one customer. So those are some very hard trade-offs, which I learned, build this whole product craft as I kind of work towards that. So I think I would say it's a lot of mindset change, right? When you come from a services side to a product side, it is literally like unlearning what you knew and adopting a brand new product thinking mindset where you have to step back, you have to take your customers along, think about from a business perspective. You have to learn to say no to probably one of your most high value customers. So those have been some really, really fantastic learnings. So yeah, for me, it's like the other way around, from very, very long B2B annual release cycles to now working with some of the startups where we ship like things every week. So yeah, it has been a very, I would say, interesting journey.
Got it.
And I think we have kind of witnessed one of the I would say fastest growing aspects, in India as a with the tech stack, India stack part of it, right? We have kind of witnessed it firsthand, and we have seen that how it has taken India from by leaps and bounds as compared to our Western counterparts. What is your take that, especially you are kind of in the payment space, right? How do you think that has enabled the India startup ecosystem?
See, I think a lot of these enablers, building blocks, if I may call it that, to help entrepreneurs scale businesses, those have been literally handed to Indian entrepreneurs on a platter, right?
Completely.
Massive customer base. You can dissect it and come up with a small customer segment, and you're talking about possibly 30 million customers in that segment.
Correct.
Which is larger than the population of many countries.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
On the mobile and internet penetration, right? We have done a fantastic job, possibly 600, 700 million mobile internet users.
Yes.
Fantastic. Payments, and be it peer-to-peer or thing, these are fundamental building blocks, right? Possibly areas that still need to fall in place, right? Trust and safety, regulations. These are also areas that are fast evolving.
Correct.
So these provide the strong platform and enablers for somebody to come and fundamentally think about making a very inorganic or a very different. So I mean, look at a lot of countries, for example, Israel, right? Very small population, and any product they build, they necessarily have to think about it globally, right? Which is good in some sense, which means as an entrepreneur, you're thinking literally unconstrained, boundaryless. But Indian B2C companies largely have played within the thing because they can afford to.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
If you have 20% of the world population in your backyard, you don't start worrying about the 80%. But if you had only 2%, you aspire for the entire 100% of the population. That's possibly why we've had TikToks and WhatsApps and YouTubes about it.
Oh, that's a very profound way of looking at it. And actually that takes me to my next question, right? I mean, despite having these mass of population, and some of the best IPO companies or that we have speaking about, which probably are in the range of anywhere around 10 to 30 billion in terms of valuation or the market cap that we talk about today, we still have not gone beyond a limited exposure globally, for example. Or for example, we have not been able to multifold grow in terms of our market cap, like some of the examples that you spoke about, like TikToks and other.
And add to the point that many of the few trillion-dollar company CEOs are actually from India, right? So, valid question. I would possibly point it out to two potential reasons, right? One, we already have a $30 to $40 billion company out of India.
Correct.
I mean, Zomato is valued at around that.
Correct.
And compounding and time is a great leveler, or given that time we should get there, right? I have absolutely no doubt that by 2035 we should have a $1 trillion Indian company. Hopefully it's Flipkart, but we'll find out, right? The other thing is, I still don't know whether Indian startups have, so far at least, been clear market definers, right? A lot of companies have taken massive markets and cornered or secured significant market share in those, be it CRM or online productivity or any of these many B2B startups that have been very successful.
Correct.
Category creation is something that hasn't happened. Again, it's a matter of time. There are enough areas where Indian startups are creating categories. People world over are surprised that we still do delivery in 10 minutes in be it Flipkart minutes or any of the other quick commerce platforms. So while e-commerce and things have been fairly entrenched in the West, the notion of getting delivered in 10 minutes is something that
Unique.
we are
Unique
thinking,
to us.
and possibly that's the direction to go towards, and that's possibly what will. These are ingredients that may go into a $1 trillion business creation.
Yeah.
I think it's a matter of time.
I agree. I agree. I mean, we have definitely seen, especially since you spoke about some of the B2B SaaS like Freshworks, or we have seen Zoho. They have been able to, in certain verticals, for example, been able to establish themselves. But yes, I think there is still a long road to go there. What would you think has some of the things that have enabled them?
On the B2B side, I think our startups have definitely taken a global approach to it.
Right.
I don't think there are too many B2B companies that look at India alone as a market. In fact, in many cases, I would even suspect that most of their revenue comes from outside India.
Correct.
Right. So as far as B2B companies are concerned, definitely there's a strong global mindset of building products.
Correct.
But as far as B2C is concerned, be it a TikTok or a WhatsApp or a YouTube,
Right.
which are again global consumer platforms.
Right.
That's an area where we need to think about. And even in this B2C, I would probably segregate it into tech-enabled businesses with strong operational and on the ground. For example,
some of these
taking something like a Flipkart globally
right.
takes
a lot,
many levels of complexity and problem solving to be done.
Correct.
As against largely tech platform. Not that one is easy and the other is tough, but it's a lot more complex.
I agree. I mean, anything which is very highly operational heavy will have its own challenges of whether it is compliance, whether it is finding the right set of people, what are the legalities of that particular
Possibly
country.
Even feet on the ground.
Yeah, the feet on the, right. So it might be, and that is why I feel that probably the reason that these B2B SaaS products, they have been able to find their foot, it could be because some of the very targeted vertical solutions that they are building, or just that they have been able to develop that kind of a talent and culture, which becomes for example, even getting listed in NASDAQ. I think those are some of the things that they have done. And I think, as you said, internet has actually kind of transformed, and many of these companies, especially in the global world, when they are looking to put it in the global market, I think I would say the USP that these SaaS products offers, which is basically prioritizing saving of time or automation, is kind of perceived very well in the Western world, which kind of prefer that over cost savings, which is usually the businesses in this part of the world. Do you think that could also be a reason for largely for the success of B2B SaaS?
Many of the B2B success stories have built a strong offering in a established and a proven market.
Okay.
Be it CRM or online productivity.
Correct.
Or some form of international payments and so on. There's a large multi-trillion-dollar market where there's an opportunity for you to build a sizable several billion-dollar company in that, right? Which is largely what many of the B2B companies in India have done. Again, goes back to how can you transform something, category creation, as they call it.
Correct.
Like, for example, what AWS did, or like what Salesforce did, right? I think several hundred billion or multi-trillion are reserved for category creators and companies that can create strong moats in the categories that they have created. Category creation is one job, and being able to create strong moats
Correct.
that enable you to hold on to
Sustain
that
it.
is the second part.
Right.
I think it's a matter of time.
Yeah, I agree with you. What would be that one thing that you would love to see Indian startup doing more?
I would love to see them go IPO more.
Okay.
And it has multiple benefits, right? It massively energizes the ecosystem, right? You've been an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur. How much talent can you attract on the strength of ESOPs? Very limited,
True.
right? That's one on the talent acquisition front. Second is in terms of the level of funding that you can attract, right?
Correct.
Many of the angel investors in India, right? Imagine angel investors who are investing from a successful IPO as compared to angel investors who are investing from their monthly salary saving. The mindset is very different. Right?
Agreed.
Let's say somebody got into Amazon or Google in 2004, 2005, 2009, 2010, enormous value creation.
Correct.
You're very likely to deploy those into these high risk because you've fundamentally seen that some of these risks pay off, right?
Correct.
Would love to see the a better unicorn tagging to successful IPO ratio. I mean, it's not that I'm hung up on output metric, but the flywheel that it enables in terms of being able to attract talent, being able to attract funding, attract other positive thing, that becomes a very different flywheel. I think if there's one thing that the Indian startup ecosystem needs, that's a series of strong IPOs, and many of them may not sustain. Hopefully, a lot more of them sustain and grow.
Yeah.
Which is anyway part of market dynamics and how companies evolve and shape. But that would set us up well in terms of being able to.
Yeah.
A few of them have already done that and done that well.
Correct.
Be it Paytm or Freshworks or Zomato or many other companies that have gone
Many
public.
soon coming up.
But many that will be a very positive Kickstarter for the overall ecosystem.
I agree. And that could be again like a step towards probably getting the next $1 trillion tech company emerging out of this
Absolutely.
zone.
The stamina with which these founders will get into it would be a lot higher with that
Correct.
Infusion of that funding,
Right. But tell me one more thing. I mean, beyond IPO is a very key milestone. But in order to, and India as a country is still very early on its, I would say, the startup journey or the product thinking mindset journey. Now, if we want to, and we see a lot of people coming into this whole 0 to 1, 1 to 10 space. But if we have to kind of compete with the, the WhatsApps or the TikToks or the Apple or those kind of NVIDIA kind of players, what do you think needs to change in a founder's mindset?
Risk taking as one of those, but I wouldn't really pinpoint and say these are areas where Indian founders in B2C, yes, there has been a lot of, there hasn't been enough category creation as I see it. But as far as, and in B2C, there haven't been too many global success stories. If I were to just identify one areas for the B2B and B2C, I would say, have we seen enough category creators in B2B?
Right.
Is it needed in your mind? Isn't it good enough to be a Infosys, which has created great value, great wealth, and so on? Are we blaming a fantastic service company for not?
No, it's not. See, again, right, I mean, it has done a fantastic job. It continues to do that in the last 40 years that it has. But we are seeing that the user behaviors are changing. The trend in terms of the digital trends are changing, right? So we need something where we can create these assets with our consumers, whether it is our B2B consumer, B2C consumer, right? Speed to deliver is a need now. It's no more a nice to have thing, right? Automation is the most preferred thing.
Do we have product managers in India?
Right.
This was 2008,
right.
2009, right? And it was quite a surprise to him.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So, which meant, yes, you're absolutely right.
Correct.
But you also touched upon an interesting point which we cannot not talk about, which is what changes for product managers in this era. What's your view on that?
I see it in two parts. One is that I think AI has been a great co-pilot just for me as a product manager to get my work done. Whether it is user research, whether it is making sense out of the data that I have, garnering the insights, or adding much more productivity hacks for my day-to-day work. That is one part. And I do believe that while I kind of stand by a lot of things that it is still very nascent, ROI has to come in. But I think in pockets, we have found some really great use cases, which were only possible to solve because of AI as a technology, how far it has come. Whether it is related to healthcare, whether it is related to things like in fintech, for example, fraud detections and all that, right? And not that these have been happening only in the last 3-4 years. These have been, the companies have been working on these technologies for the last decade or so. But I think we have been able to come far on this maturity. So I think the opportunity for product managers to look at that, how they can leverage AI as a technology to make their products more powerful, more valuable to your users, I think there is a plenty of opportunity there.
I also think about there is one other aspect of AI which is not talked about enough, which is many startups that are being built don't have to be built thanks to AI.
Correct.
That's a very stern reminder to entrepreneurs today.
Correct.
Right? Are you building something which is going to take you a year to build and so on, which one of the AI tools can already answer in a jiffy, right?
Correct.
I'm also reminded of a long conversation I had several years back with one of the startups who was pitching to one of the executives in Microsoft, and he said, your startup is a feature on Excel, right? Which means you could build your own, whatever it may be, something on the CRM or sales enablement, any of those.
Correct.
Is AI going to just be able to provide that?
Correct.
Right out of the bat? And the threat it poses to your startup and business, it possibly just forces entrepreneurs to up their ante and say, a startup doesn't need to solve this problem; it's already solved.
Could be.
So
yeah, that is true.
That's at least from that point of view, I think entrepreneurs need to embrace and look at what is it that enables, and if they can build on top of that, right, and build better experience or better relevance or better accuracy or better anything, right? Correct. Then you have a winner there.
Yeah. In fact, I'll quote one of the conversations in my own podcast that I had with Rajan, who runs Upeka. And he said that, now you have to look at that as a goodness or the capability that AI can offer and marry it to your, for example, he was talking about AI SaaS, and bring the two together. Right? So that you are able to maximize the potential that you can offer to your customers. So I think one of the most trickiest part, Raghu, that I would look at is that entrepreneurs need to put in that very
unforgiving.
Yeah. And they need to be very careful lens of, is this really a long-term game that they are playing? Is this a use case that cannot be solved in the near future by AI? So they need to have that very cautious lens.
Yeah, absolutely.
And right now, if you ask me, it feels like we are all running on treadmill, and every few weeks there is like a new product, there is like a new technology, there is something absolutely new to experiment with.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that at some point it kind of the dust settles down and we are able to see much more clearly what AI can offer and what we can do with it for the betterment of our products and for our experiences.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's true. So if, this was like a great conversation, and if I would like to, summarize this, if you had to give, one piece of advice to the Indian founders to build that next $1 trillion global giant, what would that be?
Not sure I'm qualified to do that, but since you asked me, I will. Always a temptation to say think big.
Yeah.
Right? But I still believe resilience is an extremely underrated founder trait.
Yeah.
You're not going to get it right the first time. You're not going to get it right the third time even. But being able to just hang in there and tide through, survive another day, right? And to be able to soldier on, right? I would also feel in many cases resilience and persistence could be a negative because you're holding on to your idea longer than you should.
Correct.
But I think I would still index and say resilience is a trait that I would love to see more founders build. What would that be from your perspective? If I had to ask you the same
yeah, again, I have like very limited exposure.
You can't say resilience.
No, I'm not saying resilience. But I think what I would also say is that, like while we want to do things very iteratively and, learn fast, fail fast, I would also say that, if you invest in and take time to build the right experience, invest on good design, invest on building the product thinking capabilities within talent, I would say, within your organizations. I think that helps you to put the right strong foot from the beginning itself, right? So it is very important, especially when we are thinking about building some global products. It is very important to think globally, start from, that from day one. And that requires some smart talent, especially getting the right kind of talent around design, product management, first principles thinking. So the early we get into the game, I think the likelihood that it will cater to our long-term vision, I think just increases.
Great point.
Yeah. Okay, so what do you think? Are Indian founders too much focused on valuation and funding than actual profitability?
I don't think so. I mean, I've definitely worked with founders who are just focused on building something big, refusing to sell at what they thought was not the right valuation, and willing to stay the long haul on that. So I don't think the short-term mindset is a concern with the Indian founders. I don't think so.
Got it. Okay. Are Indian tech talents more interested in building services than products?
I'll answer it slightly differently. I think some of the kids I see coding, 14, 15 years old, amazing level of tech talent we have, right? Amazing level of very self-driven, wanting to solve interesting problem. Because of or in spite of our education system, I don't know. Very self-driven and very motivated and trying to solve some interesting problems. And I think I would dread to be in tech at this point of time, given the velocity of talent that is coming in.
Right.
Very self-aware, very innovative, very wanting to get things done attitude.
Right.
I mean,
so primarily into problem solving.
I think we have a very interesting set of next generation problem solvers coming in. And I don't know whether it's necessarily because of the education system.
Okay. But do you think the education system is leading to more coders or innovators?
I think the education system, at least with the perspective I have, it's just churning out
tech
coders.
Talent.
It's just
Coders,
not problem solvers. I don't think it was different anywhere else, because if you looked at most of even the Silicon Valley successful entrepreneurs, they were basically dropouts who basically said, I'm not going to gain anything from 3 more years in an Ivy League college, right? In the best of university. I'm not going to get anything more from 2 more years here. I'd rather go and build my own Microsoft or a Facebook.
Right.
That's how it thinks. So education is under threat, if I were to put it that way.
I would say that probably that also undergoes some major transformation in the coming years.
The way it is structured today, it's probably under threat.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think this was like a fantastic conversation. I mean, you and I come from very, very different worlds. Me, all like 22, 23 years, purely MNCs, being a remote PM. And you have been somebody, who has kind of been very hands-on and completely startup. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. So,
I mean, absolutely. I mean, thanks for hosting me again. And I don't know, we spent 35, 40 minutes, and it's been absolute breeze. It's a great conversation. Thanks for hosting me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Raghu. And pleasure having you here.